Well, let's take a look quickly at this packet that you have. I want to make a distinction right away and say that this is different than the volunteer information handbook, that really big, thick book that's, well, it's about 60 pages, that has developmental traits of children and scope and sequence and all those other things. This packet is taking the best of that packet, taking the child safety policies and procedures from that packet that maybe aren't written in the most friendly terms because it's kind of legal stuff, and putting it in terms that I think will be more user-friendly for all of us. So that's the distinction between those two packets. Would you look at the table of contents right away with me? You see that this addresses all sorts of different child safety-related issues and questions. We're not going to have time today in this hour and 15-minute session together to cover all of these things. And so I have heard from a number of folks, either in person or through the grapevine, hey, I took that basic training years ago, why do I need to do it again? You know, I know this stuff, I work with kids. Every time the church doors are open, yes, there are a number of those standard things that we won't talk about. We won't take the time for today, but there is some specific new information that I, as your children's pastor, one of the shepherds here that help care for the sheep, some things that I need to make sure that all of us hear and even have an opportunity to ask some questions about. So, I want to say right up front too that this this workshop, this seminar, is not in reaction to some of the events that our church family has dealt with in regard to some child safety or more youth safety related incidences. Just to be real honest with you, the attendance at fall workshops the last several years has been abysmal. I mean, it's been really bad. And so I know that we haven't done a good job in that regard of getting people out and reviewing these things. And so our team this last fall, when we said, you know, this fall workshop thing doesn't work, we need to find a time in the spring where we could dedicate about a month of Sundays and make it just as convenient as possible to try to get people here. And so there are some of you who are giving up the opportunity to sing in the choir today or to do something else to be here. And again, thank you. I appreciate it. As I looked over the material that we would normally present, I noticed that there was a great big gap. At least a gap in subject matter that I know that I haven't had us talk about in the 7 years that I've been here. And that is, in particular, symptoms or signs of abuse in children, the process, the grooming process that perpetrators might use with children, and what needs to be done if you, as someone who is charged with caring for and instructing your children, what you would do then if you had some suspicion of some abuse that was going on. So that's an added part. But again, this is not reactionary to the incident that our church family dealt with earlier this year. Well, child safety is what has brought us here today, and so let's jump right in. Page 1 of your handout there. Any card players here? Anybody like rugby? Oh, a few of you, one of you will admit, two of you will admit to like it. It's one of my favorite games. And games like rugby and other card games, they have a trump color or a trump suit. Do you know what it means when we talk about trump? A trump card takes any other suit or any trump card that isn't higher than itself. Okay. So the idea of trump, it's significant. And in my mind, child safety in terms of the children's ministries that we do here at First Free, child safety is the card that trumps everything else. And we have had a consistent mission statement in the 7 years that I've been here that mentions child safety right at the top. We, as our mission here, provide a safe, child-friendly environment where children trust in Christ and grow in Him. And while that mission statement is subject to change, as I'm working with Pastor Kenny, who now oversees all of family ministries, children's ministries as well, as my direct oversight, we'll be modifying mission statements and things so that there's some similar verbiage between youth and children's ministries, but safety will always be the card that trumps everything else. So, let's look at page 1 together. Providing a safe, child-friendly environment. For those of you who just came in, there's a clipboard that's going around. Please register your attendance. If you're a youth worker and you don't see your name there, please write it in. I need to document that we have all had this experience. There's also this half sheet here that you can bring to me afterwards if you're a licensed teacher or a child care worker who needs continuing education units. This will qualify for that. The materials are right up here up front, so you can bring this to me at the end and I'll gladly sign it and you can stick it in your file for relicensure. So one of my greatest responsibilities as the children's pastor is to maintain a consistent screening process. So some folks here I've had to hound and hound and hound. Give me your background check authorization form, please. I don't suspect that you're doing anything that's illegal or potentially hurtful to children, but I absolutely have to have it. And it puts me in a bind sometimes because I don't want to go to people and threaten to fire them if they don't give me their form, because I need you to work in children's ministries. But you understand that we have a screening process that we say we hold to, and we need to be faithful to do that. So look at this this process that we have in place with me. We can identify it by the acronym STOP. S-T-O-P. We have the screening, which involves the background check authorization form. It could involve an interview with me or a ministry area coordinator, especially if we're talking about teaching elementary Sunday school or something like that. We want to make sure that people aren't just safe to work with kids, but also theologically safe, theologically sound. So it could involve an interview, but at minimum, the background check authorization form and the followed up by training that is either biannual, a couple times a year, need-based, especially when new people come on, because if you've worked with me as far as the leadership of children's ministries goes, you know that it can be a revolving door. People coming and going in children's ministries, and so we need to be able to do training with a room coordinator or area coordinator as the needs arise. So there's screening, there's training, there's those operations, the daily things that we do when our ministry programming is occurring, when the doors are open and we receive children. I need to make sure that there's a good teaming between you and me and the coordinators and assistants, that our daily operations are in line with the policies and procedures that we've set forth. And the policies and procedures that we're talking about today, it's my responsibility as well to monitor, to say, do our daily operations reflect our policies and procedures? Do our policies and procedures need to be revised or updated or brought into more friendly, user-friendly language and so forth? So that's our STOP process to try to ensure that we keep our kids safe. Again, going through, skipping a number of things because I'm going to trust that you will follow up with this packet and read some more of the details. Let's quickly look at the bottom of page 2 or halfway down page 2 to the chain of command. This is particularly important for safety because you need to know, who do I go to when I have an issue? Who do I go to when a kid gets hurt? Who do I go to when I know that I can't be there tomorrow to teach because my child is sick, and we need to have the appropriate ratios of of teachers and helpers to children, and so, oh, I better contact somebody. How does that work? Well, on Sundays, this is the breakdown. We have me. I'm normally on site. I'm maybe gone maybe 2 Sundays a year at the most, and I make sure that there's someone in charge. I communicate that well to the head usher, because he has an important responsibility in terms of emergencies like tornadoes and fires and things. I would also communicate to our early childhood assistants, Stephanie Woodbury, to David Capistrand, and others who have significant roles on Sunday mornings. So, early childhood assistant helps me to care for the room coordinators, who then care for those who work in the room, the lead teachers and workers and adult and youth helpers. We try to designate a lead for each hour in rooms, whether it's a lead teacher or a lead caregiver, so that those who may be a little newer to a room and its specific functions and details, there's always a lead who should know a little bit more than the others and be able to guide and direct and ensure safe ministry. There's a Sunday school director, who is Rachel Oramatsu. Ex-church director, right now it's David Capistrand. As you know, he's in an interim role as Assistant Children's Ministries Director, while I am doing assimilation and community life and some of the other big details in regard to more broader church ministry. Come the fall, I'll probably take kids' church back as his hours shrink a little bit, and he'll continue to be directly overseeing Wednesday night ministries, which I'm really excited about because I think he does a great job. Then there's the children's choir director and some of the other important workers on Sunday morning that would directly report to me. Wednesday nights, we have our midweek children's ministries director, David Capistrand, that I just mentioned. And then we have people like the on-call nurse we have on Sunday morning, but also Wednesdays. That's an important role. Their kids are running around doing things that they wouldn't necessarily do on Sunday mornings. And our club directors and coordinators and workers and helpers. And again, we have Stephanie Woodbury here, who helps with the early childhood nurseries and Adventureland and 3s and 4s and so forth. Right? They have some specific duties as well, these directors, assistants, and coordinators. I won't go into that, but we'll skip down to the bottom of page 3 and talk about workers' responsibilities. And I think that represents most of you here. I need you to provide your ministry area director, assistant, coordinator, we'll call them your supervisor. I need you to provide them with your up-to-date contact information. It seems our cell phone numbers and emails are changing all the time as we get a better deal with this or that company or whatever. And while you may be pretty good at communicating that change to the main office, which we greatly appreciate, and which your pastor of assimilation and community life appreciates as well, while you might be good about communicating that there, I need you to communicate that to your direct supervisor in children's ministries as well, because they don't have privy to the database, and they may not know that they need to go and pick up the newest version of the directory that's out on the information table in order to get a hold of you. So I need you to make sure that your direct supervisor has your contact information so that back and forth you can contact one another as needs arise and as life happens. The most challenging days of the week, it seems like, are Sundays and Wednesdays to get where we need to be, right? And so stuff happens, kids get sick, and we're responsible for running a room. We need to be able to have communication back and forth with the person who is counting on us being there. I'd like you to inform your supervisor of upcoming absences as soon as possible so that together we can help find coverage. Now there are a number of rooms who just flat out don't have subs. Okay? 4s and 5s room, I just don't have subs. Sorry. Okay? Who really wants to work in that room? Few saintly people, right? Me? Yes. Not saying anything about the kids, because from year to year, the 4s and 5s room has been a challenge for us to fill and have a sub list. But what I'm saying in that is, there may not be a sublist, so what we need you to do is contact your person well out so that we can help try to get it covered. If it's Stephanie or me rescheduling our morning so that we can fill for you because we can't find it, then that takes a little bit of time. But we want you to, when you sign up for a ministry area, not feel like you're just locked in here, right? And we're going to make you feel like the world's going to fall apart if you can't do your responsibility. If you just let us know if at all possible, then we'll do our best to have it covered for you. Please arrive at your post no less than 15 minutes prior to the program start time or the start of the worship time. All right, I started with a game analogy with my favorite game, Rook, that only a few people will play with me. But let's do another game analogy like dominoes, right? It's the domino effect when the workers in a room are later than they need to be, and then the parents are waiting to drop off their kids, and the parents need to be somewhere else, whether it's a worship service or another room that they need to teach in, or operating the cameras or wherever it happens to be. And we know, I've acknowledged that life happens, but as much as possible, please be at your post 15 minutes prior to the programming start time or service start time so that we don't have that negative domino effect. Never receive children into programming unless you are accompanied by another approved children's ministries worker who intends on staying in serving with you. Because the 2D leadership rule applies. What is 2D leadership? As much as possible, we always have another approved worker with us. As much as possible. There are some times where it just isn't possible. We don't want to obsess. You may be leading a group of kids down the hall for one reason or the other between things. You don't have to have 2D leadership necessarily in that sense. It's awfully convenient. But I'm talking about never putting yourself in a situation where you would be alone with a child or children, so that you always have another set of eyes and another set of ears that can witness to, testify to, say, yeah, I heard what went on, I saw what went on, this person is in the right. They're doing what's right and appropriate. Sometimes we get ourselves into a little sticky situation where we have parents who will come into the ministry area well before it's time to accept children, well before our workers arrive, and they're just keeping their kids busy because one parent, sings in the choir and it's an early morning and we want to ride together and so forth. That can really put our one worker who comes and is waiting for the other worker to come, put that person in a tough spot. Right? Because there's already a parent and a child in the room, and then another parent comes and wants to drop off their kid, and you're like, sorry, I can't take your child. But there's another adult, and there's already kids in the room. Yeah, but see, they're not an approved worker who's planning on staying for the time. And until my helper comes, I'm sorry, I can't take the kids. Do you understand? And that might seem unreasonable. You may think, wait a minute, I'm a public school teacher. We're alone with kids all day. Yeah. I taught in a Christian school. I was alone with 6th graders most of the day too. That's a different situation, right? We're in the church, and we know that the church is particularly susceptible to child predators. And the church has gotten all sort of bad press because we are one of the most vulnerable places to negative stuff happening with children. And so we want to have an even higher standard in the world and what's norm to protect ourselves, to protect our children, to protect the name of Christ and the gospel. Yes.
If a parent comes, okay, let's say that situation happens, and then the parent they want to drop off their kids. Is it okay to say you're welcome to stay here until the next teacher comes, but I can't have you drop your child off? Is it okay to do that?
I would prefer that you don't.
Okay.
Because what if your person doesn't come? What if your helper doesn't come? Right? Because that happens. And their cell phone isn't working. They can't get a hold of me because sometimes I forget to turn my cell phone on Sunday morning. Rarely, or, Stephanie's busy. Whatever it happens, and then you're waiting, then that parent, you put that parent in an awkward situation. I need to just stay now because we have 10, 15 kids. Oh, but I gotta go away. we need to deal with the mess that we've just made. Right? Okay. So, where you're assigned name tag at all times, please inform us if you don't have a name tag that says that you are an approved Children's Ministries worker. Sometimes they get worn home or misplaced. I know some of our children are particularly good at destroying them. Please let us know. We'll make you a new one. They should be hanging in classrooms. They're adhesive name tags for those who work in the nursery. The goal is that we always identify ourselves as someone who's approved to receive somebody else's children. And so if I haven't done a good job of making sure that you have a name tag, please let me or Stephanie or even Ann Fenderson, my assistant, know that, and we'll get one to you. So all children and adults should be labeled in some way. So we have our name tags as workers, but also our children are labeled nursery all the way through, right? And so they may have a clip-on name tag. Yes?
With our shirts on Wednesday nights, are we all supposed to have name tags? Mess up on. Okay, were we supposed to get those, or are we supposed to just write them out each week?
We have been making clip-on name tags. See, that's an important.
Okay, well, we don't have.
So glad we're having this training, Lisa, so we can catch that. Yeah, not a problem to get those made up. We get the template and we get her done. So, please serve our children and families with enthusiasm as unto the Lord. It's a spiritual act of worship. I know sometimes it's real hard to get excited about coming and working in the children's room. You know, especially when somebody's had a big diaper and it reeks in that room and down the hallway. And, you know, it's hard enough to care for your own 2-year-old, but you know, what to do enthusiastically for others. Please come when you're scheduled to work with our children. Come enthusiastically. Do it as unto the Lord, as an act of worship, understanding that you are serving the body of Christ and facilitating other parents' worship and service on Sunday morning by what you're doing. It's huge. Let's talk about some classroom guidelines. I'm still on the bottom portion of page 4. Classrooms and teaching areas must never be locked while in use. I can only think of 2 doors in the children's ministries area to classrooms that are locked, and it's just because they're a double entrance. There's one here at the toddler room. We don't need both of those entrances. Actually, the infant nursery, and there's one in room 103 downstairs. But otherwise, the doors in and out of the particular classrooms should not be locked. Each classroom door must have a window. Pretty sure every one of our classrooms have windows. Our sleeping rooms have a little thing you can peer through, make sure that the baby's okay. Please don't block any of the windows or put paper on the windows. There are special circumstances where that would be needed, but I doubt that anybody's changing during children's programming. Right? No wedding rehearsals or wedding preparation, anything like that. All right. Visible ministry guidelines. Again, you're going to hear this phrase, 2 deep leadership rule. You're going to hear it quite a bit. An individual worker is never to be left alone with the child. At least 2 workers should be present whenever possible. If 1 or more elementary age children arrive early to programming and you're alone, you know, because 4th, 5th, and 6th graders can check themselves in, right? You're in a ministry area alone and you see some kids want to come and bide some time until the start of programming. You welcome them. Oh, it's so good to see you this morning, but you know what? I can't take kids until I have another worker. So please go find mom and dad, or please wait right here in this nice visible spot while I continue to get the space ready for ministry to you. You understand where I'm going with that? Yes. And again, in a normal classroom setting, you know, as a teacher, I would have my door open after school. I would be in there grading papers. I may have several kids come in, do a little tutoring, this or that, but it's different in the church. We need to hold ourselves to a different standard. Okay? So, would you skip over to the middle of page 5, check-in procedures. Oh, a worker may not check in, receive children if another approved adult or youth worker is not present. Our youth workers are wonderful. We have some interspersed here. I love you kids, but you may not receive children until an adult arrives. Right? It puts you in an awkward spot sometimes, but we're going to train and retrain our parents even. Now, just because you see a living, breathing soul in that room does not mean that you leave your kid with them. Right? So, would you look at the bottom of page 5? Turn away children if one of the 3 following factors exist. I can turn away children? Yes, you may. Don't want to make a habit of it, because we want to, as much as possible, minister to children and families and share the love of Jesus with them. But sometimes when you're turning away children, you are sharing the love of Jesus with others, because you don't want that child who's visibly sick, not in accordance with our health and wellness policy, to be admitted into children's programming. And so we have the health and wellness guidelines posted outside the nursery, big poster. But you know, there are some of the obvious ones. If a child is visibly sick, temperature, snotty nose, coughing, and that sort of thing, we don't admit them to children's ministries. So if the current child-to-worker ratio doesn't allow more children, now there's sometimes where we have some flexibility, right? For instance, Tuesday Treasures. One of the leaders came to me this last week. See, Tuesday Treasures, even though they're not run by children's ministries, they're required to abide by our child and safety policies and procedures as well. And so one of the ladies came to me and said, well, you know, we have 2 workers in the nursery. That means we could take 6 babies. We have this visiting mom who's brought this baby. Do I turn her away? And you know, the babies that are in the nursery, they're closer to, you know, toddler age, so it's not like we're talking about infants. I said, of course, don't turn that mom away. All right, there's some flexibility with our ratios, but we need to consider ratios for safety. How much attention am I going to be able to give to the kids that I already have, and to ensure safety and solid instruction to them. We don't let a child or unauthorized sibling check in another child. There's some flexibility in our policy for allowing approved middle school and high school age siblings check in and out their siblings. I'm going to let you read that, and I'm going to skip ahead to top of page 6. Please ensure that each child and his or her belongings are fully labeled. This is key, especially in our nurseries and early childhood rooms. We've got potty training stickers, allergic stickers. This item belongs to. All sorts of different stickers at checkout. And I know if you're in the room receiving children and trying to keep these kids safe and occupied, you can't always be at the doorway to greet as you would like to, but I hope that you will do your very best to do. And the kids don't always get labeled like we'd like them to, but please help us in that regard to make sure that children and their things are properly labeled. If a child isn't registered, nursery all the way through, they would still get an adhesive label. We use those 4-part labels, of course, in our nurseries, and even in the twos room, that's an option because we have the pagers. But 3 on up, there is that 1-part label. It's about this big, and it says early childhood, you know, ministries or something like that. And it's 2-part because there's a claim ticket. When we don't have children that are registered, that have the name tag with the family's picture on the back, then we need something as a reference, especially if the hours have changed over since the child was put in, and the teacher that originally took that visiting child in is not there any longer. How do I know who this child is supposed to go to? I should ask to see the corresponding number, corresponding claim ticket. Does that make sense? Let me give you one more example of how important labeling is, okay? Our nurseries, several weeks ago we had a visiting family, and there's a little fault on both sides, All right? The visiting family came and had a diaper and a bottle and some formula. Not in a diaper bag, right? And quick, you know, they're already kind of late to the service, and so we get things taken care of and put the stuff in the cubby, and the instructions were give bottle at such and such a time. Well, our wonderful, committed workers, there was somehow a mix-up, and that bottle got mixed up with another bottle, or actually I think the formula things got mixed up. Weren't labeled. And so this visiting child who has a allergy to normal formula and whatever was given the wrong formula. And it was caught after the child, you know, had their meal. And this little child had diarrhea for the next day or so afterwards. So it wasn't like an anaphylactic shock, but you understand how important. And I had to go and call that family. No, not poor me, but, you know, having to call that family and say, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that we didn't follow through on our own policies and make sure that everything you gave us was labeled before we took it. And when you visit with us next time, please make sure that you bring things in a diaper bag. All right? So just point in case there. So, top of page 7, please. It's preferred that when changing boys and girls diapers and helping with toileting, that women do this. Not that we guys are trying to get out of it. But that shows that the majority of child pedophile cases that are reported and followed through and so forth are with men. And so again, we just want to hold ourselves to a higher standard. And so sometimes it just won't be possible, but on the whole, if it can be our women doing that, I think that's a good thing. Talking about allergies and related to snacks and treats, the middle of page 7. Look at that, please. Due to the growing frequency of food allergies among children, the following policies regarding snacks and treats should be followed. Snacks served to children during first free children's programming must be store-bought and accompanied by an ingredients list that may be checked prior to serving. Really? More store-bought processed food for our kids? Yeah. Try to choose some healthier store-bought processed things if possible. But we need to be relatively certain that if there's a child who has, for instance, a nut allergy, particularly peanut allergies, and those can be just incredibly sensitive, that if you made a pan of brownies in your kitchen and you were so careful to wash your hands and make sure that the area was clean and whatever, but maybe you made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich on that same counter for your children earlier that day, and somehow what you touched got into the pan. I mean, there is potential for anaphylactic shock for a child who is very sensitive to peanut butter. And so even the preparation needs to be as thoughtful and careful. And we know that even when we buy bakery at a store, there's normally a little tag in that says it could have been exposed to areas that had nuts or something. But we do our very best anyway. And so if you would have store-bought snacks, and then an ingredients list that could be looked at, so that if we know we have a child with a kiwi allergy, a tree nut allergy, a peanut butter, a milk allergy, whatever it happens to be, we can look at the label. Parents can look at the label. So it may be taking the ingredients list, cut it off the box because it's a big, little Debbie thing or whatever. It's not going to fit in the treat bucket that our kids bring home. Make sure that that's included so it can be referenced. If you are a leader who sends home a treat bucket, please make sure that this policy is clearly written on the top of the bucket for parents, so they have it to refer to. How sad it is for the child who is so excited that they got the treat bucket. Parents normally aren't very excited about getting the treat. But the child is so excited about getting the treat bag. And then they bring their treat, and then the teacher says, sorry, I can't serve your treat. It's like daggers going into the heart of a little person, right? So if we can communicate that as best as possible to our parents on top of the treat bucket, that's great. During outreach events and other events where we will have children from the community, we want children from the community invited and brought in, we're not going to have much history on them. We need to make sure that we post the ingredients, the menu for what we're going to be serving each day of EBS. And we do a pretty good job of that. And we have, I know, some room to grow there. All right, moving right along, because time is moving right along as well. Bottom of page 8. Well, you're on page 8. Let me talk about something at the top, and then we'll go to the bottom. Okay. You've noticed that crazy new table that we have in the toddler room? Isn't that fun? All right. I didn't get that just to spend money, though I had been eyeing it for several years. The reason that we got that table is really about child safety. Because we serve snacks in the toddler room. We serve approved snacks that come out of the cupboard. So we're always using the same sort of fishy crackers, pretzels, animal crackers. We use those approved snacks, but those kids like to get up and down. They're toddling, right? And so we have a kid eating a snack, then they run across the room to go to some toy, and there's a possibility of choking, right? And so I haven't lost lots of sleep about this, concern, but that's the reasoning for that table. So please, when you serve snacks to our littlest ones, think about, are they going to stay in their seat and have their snack eaten before they get up and run and are engaged in some other activity where they could potentially choke? And let's make sure that hands are clean and surfaces are clean, and that if sippy cups are used, that they're labeled, that we make sure kids aren't swapping sippy cups and swapping germs. All right, so bottom of page 8 now, leaving, arriving, and traveling with children. Oh, come on, Jonathan, you have to be so specific. I mean, I'm a thinking person. Well, sometimes it's good to be reminded of these things. How do I leave and travel and arrive with children? Well, you take a thorough head count, right? You ensure that no children are in the restroom or hiding under tables or in the little playhouse in the toddler room or other things like that. You make sure that you've got all the children and they're accounted for, and you check them off on the roster. The roster says I have this many children. This is what's in actuality. Has the child been picked up? Has the child not been signed in like they should have before we leave? Check your head count against your roster and then take the roster with you. And then put a sign at the door as to where you are. We want to be as hospitable as we can to newcomers to our church. And if a new family comes and the class is gone, well, let's see, the rapture couldn't have happened because the rest of the church, where in the world is the kindergarten, And so if there's some sort of a sign, we're at the playground, please sign in and join us. They can look right out the window and see you at the playground. We're at the library, sign in, please find us at the library. Those are those sort of courtesies and thinking ahead that, if it's a new family, even if it's one of our existing families, but they're new to the grade level, that we put up a sign and let people know where we've taken the children. So I think I'm at the top of page 9 right now. Early childhood, we have wonderful ropes that everybody can hold on to. Elementary, they're not going to cooperate with us with ropes. So we need to be more strategic when we travel down the hallway with elementary kids, right? Now, I'm not expecting perfect lines and whatever, but I do expect that you will take our elementary kids down the hall in a line. That they're not a screaming mass, pushing mass, running ahead of you. You need to be empowered as leaders and teachers and helpers to do that. Let me give you instructions on how to do it. Before you leave the room, you set a line leader. Okay? Maybe you have the kids' names on a popsicle stick, and that's how you choose it to make it fair. Maybe you just show favoritism and pick on your favorite kid. I don't know. But you choose a line leader, and then you give instructions to the whole group. Okay, the line leader is going to follow my instructions, but the rest of you are going to be listening as well. So when we leave the classroom, our line leader is going to take us to the first set of double doors and stop. You'll follow behind that person in line, keeping your hands to yourself and quiet, and when they stop, you stop. And then everyone will listen to my next cue to go to the next door, or to the water fountain, or wherever it happens to be. And you listen for my cue, and you stop, and we stay together, and so forth. And if I'm alone, because maybe my helpers stay back at the room to clean up the paint mess that we made, or whatever it happens to be, I don't leave the line, because I already have a line leader. And I don't stay at the back of the line, because that's way too far away from the rest of the class, especially if there's 20 or something. I walk side by side. I walk in about the middle of the line, abreast with one of the children. And so if something happens, I can at least grab about 8 of them. There's something about the zone of proximity in behavior management, right? That you don't always have to point out the bad behavior. Stop that. We're not talking now. You just get close. Sometimes that's all it takes. Your presence right there. Okay? Sorry to invade your personal space. All right, let's skip ahead here to middle of page 10, restroom procedures. When a child is in 1st to 3rd grade and they need to use a restroom that is outside of the classroom, take at least one child along and wait outside the restroom. So from this current CMC, we know the CMC is going to be moved to the gym eventually, but the current CMC, so the long ways down here to the bathrooms that every person, the Children's Ministry Center green room, sorry to use coded language, and that's a long way to send a child to use a restroom with adults. We don't know these adults. We don't know this visiting adults, male or female, that may be in that restroom. And so we want to come down with the children. We need to build our staffs so this is possible. But we need to come down with the children and let 2 of them go in at a time. Another set of eyes and ears. We were outside and walk them back. Again, this isn't a public school. We hold ourselves to a different and a higher standard. And so it may seem challenging and unreasonable, but we got to do it. Children in grades 4 through 6 may be sent in pairs to the restroom without adult supervision. Oh, but helper, please station yourself by the door to make sure that they actually come back. All right? By that age, we have some kids that will look for good opportunities to get out of class and not come back. And because the children can sign themselves in and out of children's ministries, because they're 4th to 6th grade, they could go to the bathroom break and conceivably never come back, and then just find their parents later, right? And all that while the parents are thinking, my child is under their charge. My child is safe in a classroom and doing what they should be doing. And you know what? They have legal reason to believe that, right? In local parentis, we're in place of the parent. They have entrusted those children to us. And so the burden is on us to ensure that the children are with us and accounted for. When helping a preschooler in a restroom, always leave the door open far enough that other workers can see, unless there's a window. If at all possible, have women help girls and men help boys. Now I'm talking about more preschool here, right? So we don't have an instance where you're going to embarrass a little boy. You kind of have to read the kids, right? If a child needs help with his or her pants, have them come to you in the doorway, right? So that the other workers can see that when you're working in this area of the child, that you are doing what you should be doing. That brings us, let's see, don't allow children to watch while other children are using the restroom. Well, that might seem like, what? There are some kids who will just kind of stand and watch. It's not appropriate. Right? In bathroom emergencies, use disposable gloves to protect yourself and others. And I'll let you read the rest of that portion. Let's go on to appropriate touch and affection guidelines. Physical touch and affection is important, especially with little ones. It's part of establishing and maintaining the trusting relationship as a means of helping people understand the love of Jesus and God the Father and so forth. But we need to be so careful with touch and displays of affection. Let's talk about that a little bit. All physical touch and affection must, with rare exception, be in the presence of other workers. And the context should occur in reference and response to the needs of the child and not of the worker. Oh, I just love children. I just can't get enough of them. I just have to initiate a hug or some touch with every child that I see. That makes red flags go up for me as a pastor and administrator. Right? It is such an incredible privilege to work with children. Not a right. Not something that we do to get our needs met, but we are here to meet the needs of children and families. And in the process we get blessing, but oh, we better be careful with any touch or affection that we initiate that it's not for our benefit, that it's only for the benefit of the child. And so reasonable, wise, and brief touch should be practiced, and except for during diapering and toileting, touch in any place that a one-piece swimming suit would cover should be avoided. So there are some safe touch areas. Shoulder, pat on the head, maybe on the elbow, something like that. If you want to hug a child because maybe it's their birthday or something, right? Then you go to the child. It's always good to get on a child's level, right? You go to the child and say, "May I give you a happy birthday hug?" And the child gets to choose whether or not you make that physical contact with them. You don't force it on them. And that shows from the very beginning that you respect children, you respect their personal space, you respect their body, and it is also helping them understand respect for their own body. I don't have to let people violate me or touch me in affectionate ways that I'm not ready for or willing to have. Worker-initiated touch may include the things I said, like high five, that's always great. Head, shoulder, good job, handshake, that sort of thing. Rubbing children's backs at nap time is appropriate when necessary. You know, in our Moms Day away, sometimes in Tuesday Treasures we have kids that need some help of falling asleep, but we avoid caressing, which could be interpreted as sexual in nature. To little ones, hugging and comfort may be given liberally but appropriately. Kissing should be avoided, never initiated by a worker, never on the lips. Now, oh, we have some cute babies around here, you know, and before we know it, just want to kiss them on the top of the head because they smell so good and fresh too, you know. You know, just be careful with that. Especially when it's an infant that you receive from a visiting family. You don't have any relationship or context with these people, and it's like, oh, the baby is so cute. You know, you're not a politician. So just, unless you really know these people and know that they won't be put off or offended, just hold your lips, okay? With hugging, especially with older girls, it should happen from the side if at all possible. And I would say any hugging that you do with children, if at all possible, from the side. So if a child is running up to you because they're so excited to see you, then you just do a quick, just kind of quickly rotate like this, and you get down because you want to be at a child's level, and then you do a hug from the side. So that you don't have the frontal connection, right? And especially if you've got little ones running up to you. Now I'm not as tall as some guys, but even so, a child's head is right in an uncomfortable spot for us guys, right? Head plant, right? So you just train yourself to go to the side and down and give a side hug. It's brief. So glad to see you. Welcome to Children's Ministries. That sort of thing, right? Workers should avoid having kids sit on their laps. Pastor Caldwell, how can I do ministry without having children sit on my lap? Okay. Now there are some cases where children just absolutely need to be on the lap. There are some sensory issues and things, and so before they can hear or calm down or whatever, they need to be on your lap in an appropriate way, and maybe even feel your arms around them. But really, kids don't need to be on our laps. And should they be on our laps, this is this is how it should be. Sitting on the legs, closest to the knees if possible. Not straddled over one leg so that their genital areas, I'm sorry if this is X-rated, but so that their genital areas are not on your knee, especially when we have kids who are having those parts become sensitive and stimulated as they're growing. All right? So never straddled over the leg or over your private areas. You are in charge, and you be in charge that way too. Follow me? And so you be assertive if you welcome a child to sit on your lap for one of those necessary times. Okay. Appropriate discipline. Slapping of hands and spanking and other forms of physical punishment and correction are never to be used here. Although you may identify a child who clearly needs a spanking. And it takes everything in your power not to approach their parents later and say, you know what? I'd like to share some scripture verses with you about how important the rod is. We can't do that here. We don't have the authority to do that. And so we need to use our behavior guidance plans that we've developed for both preschool and elementary age children. We need to involve the parents just as soon as it's necessary and let them be the ones that correct the behavior that we can correct with the reasonable plans that we have in place. And so I'm just going to point these out to you. We have a 5-step early childhood behavior guidance plan, pages 12 and 13. All right? You have the power and the authority to discipline, not punish, but you have the power and authority to discipline and to correct, to redirect, and this lays it all out here. But please don't be the Lone Ranger, right? This plan involves bringing in the early childhood assistant, Stephanie Woodbury, bringing in me, if necessary, and certainly bringing in parents when necessary, when the behavior does not stop after you've done a reasonable time out, after there's been an opportunity for a child to make right what they've done, and so forth. Look ahead then to page 15. Oh, there's a 5-step plan for elementary as well. So you don't have to put up with the garbage from kids in Sunday school classes. We don't. Oh, but I want to be their friend. Yeah, be their friend. Do what you should do as an adult and an approved children's ministries worker. Don't tolerate the disrespect. Don't tolerate the disrespect to classmates and to things. Don't enable that poor behavior. Follow through with his plan. This plan for elementary looks a little bit more like the assertive discipline model, but it's not, Adam, you're out of here! No, it's not that kind of thing that maybe you had seen with some teachers years ago, but there is a graduated kind of thing where there are warnings and reminders, and I will get involved eventually if I need to, and parents will get involved and so forth. Let's go ahead to page 18. Field trips and off-site activities. Now let me say that a lot of what we're talking about today we're already doing, though there hasn't necessarily been verbiage for it in our volunteer information handbook. So we put these things in writing now for us all to refer to and keep each other accountable. All events and outings involving children from First Free Church should be cleared through the children's pastor. So for instance, when Sally Pittman has her wonderful first grade Sunday school party at her house, she talks to me every year. Okay? I haven't advertised through the church that the first grade Sunday school is having this party. That's Sally's deal, but it's First Free Children. And so then in a lot of people's minds, it's a First Free sponsored event. And so I need to be brought into it. Also, I can help with calendar and scheduling, right, to make sure that she doesn't put it on a day where it's going to conflict with a number of the families because there's something else going on at church. But I need to know so that I can answer questions, I can help her think through the time, I can make sure that she has a number of approved adults there, you know, all those sorts of things. Workers are never to take a child home to their own home or to the child's without another adult, without the consent of a parent or guardian. So we phone ahead, we do our very best. If a child is forgotten here, and sometimes they are. Never take a child or children outside of the church building or program room without prior consent of the ministry supervisors. Some cases a written permission slip is needed. A few years ago we had our wonderful guys in Stockade do a field trip that I didn't know about it. I think this was before Tom's time, so don't sweat, Tom. So, you know, they wanted to award the guys by bringing them to Dairy Queen, which is wonderful and fine. That was a field trip, and parents didn't know anything about it. So then I hear a couple days later, Pastor Caldwell, do you know that the guys took my son to Dairy Queen? There was no permission slip. I had no idea. So I had to follow up, I had to apologize, I had to explain, I had to make sure that our Stockade Rangers all know that if you're going to bring our children off-site for any reason when they've been entrusted to us to be here on-site for programming, then a permission slip is required. It doesn't have to be the whole medical release form because we already have that. But parents need to say, yes, my child may go with you under these circumstances with these drivers and so forth. All part of child safety. Never take a child someplace, like I said, alone. Tutoring leadership role should still be followed. Skip down to the bottom of page 18, some overnight policies. We don't have a whole lot of overnight activities with children, more so with youth, but we have a Stockade overnight. In time, I hope that we'll be able to take advantage of Camp Chaminad's 4th, 5th, 6th grade retreat, where that will require us to have adult chaperones with us. So supervising adults are never to sleep in a closed room alone with any child attending an event except for their own children. It may seem like a duh, but it's important to mention. There must be a clear boundary for supervising adults' sleeping space and that of participating children. Here's the line, boys and girls. My stuff is over here. Please don't come into my space. Here's the sleeping space for children over here on this side of the room. I, as a leader, want to make sure that there's no way that it could be perceived that in the night, in the dark, that I reached over and somehow took advantage of a child or hurt a child in some way. You follow me? And so we're just so careful. Again, maybe that's a no-brainer, but it's in writing now. We can refer to it. Supervising adults must avoid bathing with and changing in front of participating children. We don't really have locker rooms here at First Free anymore. I can't think of any instances where you would need to change in front of and bathe with our children. Maybe there's swimming parties or things like that, but come on, right? Okay? So we need to be careful and strategic as leaders, right? Your children will be okay if you slip into the stall and you get changed and you shower alone, right? There should be another leader there anyway. You can take turns. All right. Children's ministries workers may not administer medications of any kind. I'm at the top of page 20. Except in rare cases where procedures for responding to a life-threatening allergic reaction may need it. All right. So we have first aid kits. We have an on-call nurse. You can page the nurse, pager 20 at any time. The nurse will meet you at the nursery because that's where the signal went out. Then you bring them to the child if the child has a need or if the child is walking, whether it's just a smashed thumb or whatever. Then the nurse can help you, but we don't give medications unless it's a situation where a parent has given us instructions. Said my child needs this at this time. If my child should get stung by a bee, here's the EpiPen, this is how you use it. If my child should go into a seizure of some kind, here is the medication that is needed and so forth. All right. Let's move ahead. Middle of page 22. Okay, I'm not going to go over fire alarms and evacuations because we practiced that at least once a year on Wednesday night. Sometimes when people lean against the fire thing, we have that on Saturday morning. Okay. Number 7. If re-entrance to the building is not possible after you've taken your children out, you're a safe distance away, you followed the exit maps, you've rolled the kids out from the nurseries and the cribs with the fire blankets, you've done all that, If re-entry to the building is not possible, checkout will occur from either the southeast corner of the parking lot during warm weather, or from the Hazel Ridge Commons. So we'll walk kids over and we'll do a dismissal from there. You will have grabbed your roster and done your head count. You know exactly the kids that you have, and you don't release them unless you can check them off to parents. And we have a central location so that parents aren't having to run around the perimeter of this huge building looking for their kids. If re-entry is possible, of course, we'll just go right back in and continue with programming. All right. Would you stand up, please? Would you stretch? Okay. Ask for permission first for your neighbor and then give him a little rub on the shoulders. Is it okay if I give you a little shoulder rub? Because I want to respect your personal space.
Give you permission.
All right.
This is good.
Yes.
I didn't see a lockdown procedure, with the shootings at the schools and stuff.
Thank you.
Is there a...
Thank you. You can be seated and I'll answer that question. Thank you, David. That one is in process.
Okay.
We, because I'm overseeing assimilation and community life and working directly now with our ushers, that is an area that we've identified that we need to develop. So I couldn't get that developed and put in here in enough time, but we'll have another one of these someday. Or we'll probably just get it to you in written form and trust that you read it. But there will be a lockdown procedure. Lockdown will be even more challenging now, of course, when Children's Ministries, the hub of things, move from there to the gym. But we're going to do our very best in those circumstances to continue to keep our children contained and safe. All right, page 24. This is an addition to our policies and procedures, something that I know that I haven't covered as the shepherd guarding the gate and guarding the sheep, our littlest ones here. In my 7 years here, I haven't addressed these issues, and so we're going to do it now. Of course, there are a few more pages than what we have time for, so I'm going to do my very best to just use the time well without going to speak fast. Child abuse is any mistreatment or neglect of a child that results in harm or injury. But that harm or injury may not be apparent right away, because it could be emotional, social, and spiritual abuse. But it does make harm. Physical abuse is purposely injuring a child by hitting or biting, shaking, kicking, burning, any way that we could dream up in a sad or sadistic way to hurt children. Physical abuse. Emotional, consistent, and or extreme crushing of a child's spirit with verbal attacks and threats and humiliation. Then there's sexual abuse. And I'll say this right up front, I know I have young ears, so I'm going to make sure that we have maybe the PG-13 version here when we talk about these things. Any sexual activity with a child, a minor, not limited to normal understanding what sexual activity would be, but including touching, caressing, groping, etc. It could be forced or consensual. Abuser to child or child to abuser, because many times in the grooming process, the perpetrator has prepared the child for child-initiated to adult acts. We'll get there in a little bit. Maybe abuser to, the abuser may be an adult, an adolescent, or even another child. There's an unfortunate incident I remember hearing about when I was in high school and I was working in children's ministries in my father's church. I grew up as a PK in a church of a little over 100 people, and so as a PK you get to try your stab at anything you want to do, you know. And so I was working quite a bit in children's ministries, which was wonderful preparation for this times, I don't know, 900, 1000, right? But anyway, there was a case I heard about a pastor's kid, maybe preteen adolescent, who was entrusted with running the nursery, and this boy molested and ended up children that was under his care. So it can be not just kids who come from certain families and stereotypes and whatever. A pastor's kid in his teens molesting children under his care. The teen should never have had that responsibility alone with those kids, but nevertheless. Sexual comments, joking, innuendo, references made to a child's body that are sexual in nature or in regard to his or her sexual orientation, sexual motions, or body language, advances directed towards a child. They may not be considered sexual abuse per se, because it may not have been a physical thing, but they would be considered sexual harassment or the intent to commit sexual abuse. And those are circumstances just as serious and potentially harmful, wholly inappropriate, unlawful. Then there's neglect, and this is willingly failing to provide for a child's emotional or physical needs, failing to offer guidance, supervision, and so forth. Now, there are some signs and symptoms that we'll talk about here briefly, but they don't always mean abuse. But these are some things that we may notice. Physical abuse, unexplained bruises, welts, broken bones, cuts or scrapes, burns, missing hair, injuries or redness around the genital area, injuries at different stages of healing. Okay? Injury or medical condition that hasn't been properly treated, bodily complaints related to stress, so there may be unexplained stomach aches and headaches and vomiting and suicidal gestures, self-mutilation. The appearance of poor grooming and dirty appearance, clothing in poor condition that's not suited to the weather. You may think, as the one caring for this child, I wonder if something's going on here that we need to look into. Child's behavior could be signs. Aggressive or withdrawn behavior, especially as a shift in personality. Unusual fears of certain people, going home, etc. Craving for attention, running away. Fatigue without a physical cause, depression, lack of concentration, that's a big one. School problems, misbehavior, hungry, begging for food, stealing, and the list goes on. A child who is unusually clingy. And then also pseudomotor behavior, where a child is speaking of certain things and acting in ways that are well beyond their age level. What is this child being exposed to? Adults' behavior. Okay, harsh punishment of a child in public, and they may refer to the child as difficult or different or bad. Seem unconcerned about the child. Giving conflicting stories about injuries. That's a big one. Conflicting stories about injuries. We brought our little daughter, Alexandra, to the emergency room after hot coffee was spilled on her here in one of our nurseries. Don't bring hot coffee into our early childhood rooms, please. Right? We brought her to the emergency room with burns on her face, down her chest, and I told the story, and then I told the story again, and then I told the story again, and then I told the story again, and then I brought it to a specialist, and I told the story 3 more times. Not just because I like talking, but because our caregivers in the medical field know this. So they want to make sure that the stories don't conflict, that there isn't physical abuse that's being hidden. And so while it may be frustrating to us when we bring in our children and they're harmed, they have that responsibility as well to notice, are there conflicting stories about this injury, because they're trying to cover it up and they haven't got their details straight. All right, I have to skip ahead. I'm going to let you read this on your own, but let's go to page 25. The grooming process. Again,
So Jonathan, this
yes.
in terms of that, so I'm in the nursery and there is an injury. I'm not expected to ask the parents about the injury, am I? I mean, if they come in with a Band-Aid on, that's not, I mean.
This is if we see a child who has injuries again, scabs, and things we may start to wonder.
And then that's reported to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
and we'll talk about that in just a minute.
All right.
But yes, if you have questions, come to me and we'll sort it out and we'll figure out where to go next. How to collect information in a way that wouldn't make people, parents who are in the good, feel like we're trying to get them or set them up. Collecting information that's going to help us determine whether or not we need to go and report to Ramsey County. Good question. All right, so I said that the reason for this seminar is not reactionary to what our church family has dealt with. Okay, it was in the plan and in the works prior to all that coming about. But as those details unfolded, and as I was preparing for this, I realized that there's an important element that we've never talked about, and that's this next one. Okay, and it's what's called the grooming process. Okay, and the grooming process is where there is a perpetrator who will, over time, help prepare a child to be violated. And there are certain trademarks of this. Typically there's a child who maybe dad isn't around, and so there's a need for a male figure in his life. In some cases where you hear on the news a female teacher having sexual relations with a student, maybe where the student has had some issues in life, exposed to pornography early on or something that makes them more sexually aggressive and open, and a teacher who is needy finds an opportunity, and the grooming process happens that way. So it's not just men who would groom, it's men and women who would groom and prepare a child to be violated. So usually a person who needs some mentoring, some help, some support, maybe that person has been bullied a lot, and so this is a good friend coming into the person's life. And certain things are done to deaden the child's senses to what's eventually going to happen. So there may be a lot of sexual talk going on, talking about the body and the anatomy and so forth. And it might start small and then get quite overt in time as the child is being prepared, is being groomed to be violated. And so, why am I bringing this up? I don't want us to create a culture of suspicion here in first grade. But I want us to have the background and information and the vocabulary to be able to speak about these things. I want us to talk about these issues with any person that would come into children's ministries as a part of that screening process. Wow, okay, this church is up on this. And if I'm a potential perpetrator, a predator, I know that a part of the training process is making sure people understand these things and have some language for it. So if they start to see some clues or evidences, they're going to go to somebody in charge and talk about it. Again, not to create a culture of suspicion, but now you have some vocabulary, hopefully, and I'm going to let you read the rest of that section on your own. Now, all right, what happens if you see some of these signs of abuse in children? Again, isn't limited to sexual abuse, physical, maybe emotional abuse. You watch interaction between a mom and a child, a dad and a child here, and you go, that just seems over the line and not right. What do you do? Please come to me. We'll talk it through. I'll decide how best to follow up with that, to gather some information. If there is a time, and it's possible, I've witnessed it working with children, if there's a time where you actually get, like, not a confession from a child, but they recount to you, this is what happened, well, yes, you come to me right away as well. And then we do very little investigation on our own. We report because we are mandatory reporters. And so, again, not that we want to trap anybody, not that we want to create a culture of suspicion, but we don't look the other way and hope it'll go away. We follow through. If you have some suspicion about me or another one of the paid children's ministries workers, you go right to Todd. Go right to Todd, right? Because you don't want to have to put yourself in a situation where I may try to defend myself. Just go right to Todd, okay? And I have nothing to hide. I won't try to hide. Maybe I'll be a little bit hurt at the beginning, but you know, I've chosen this profession. So I should be willing to allow myself to be under scrutiny. But at the same time, I should be wise enough not to put myself in situations where you would have to suspect that I did something. But with our paid children's ministry staff, you go right into Todd, or with any other pastors for that matter. All right? So if we should need to report something, look at the last page, please, in your booklet. All right? If I wanted to keep you from doing this, I would make it so easy. Right? Here's the Ramsey County reporting form right here. You don't have to go online to find it. It's right in the back of the packet. And it says very specifically what the statute is. A person who knows or has reason to believe a child is being neglected or physically or sexually abused shall make an oral report immediately by phone to be followed up by a report in writing. So we're serious about this, aren't we? So, because of the amount of content that I had to cover, and because of the amount of content I felt we needed to cover, and just the nature of it, I unfortunately have to end right here. I'm kind of a downer. But it doesn't need to be. We're informed, we're prepared, we have the information, we have the vocabulary, we know what we're supposed to do. Let's do ministry to children and families together, providing a safe, child-friendly environment where children trust in Christ.